Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about knights. All right, so we talked about castles, or we'll talk about castles, not sure the video order. I've just recorded castles. And probably one of the things you think about when you think about Europe are the knights in shining armor with their chivalry. So let's look at that a little more closely today. All right, so how do you become a knight? Well, first off, you have to be from a noble family. All of those stories going, thinking of the poor boy who goes and shows his bravery becoming a knight was a lie. Sorry. You had to be a royal, or excuse me, not royal, noble, so rich family. And at about seven, you would become what's called a page. Your family would basically negotiate with a knight and say, all right, you are going to go live with this other person and you will be their servant. But in return, they will train you to become a knight. So you're going to go and do things like cleaning, maybe cooking, maybe going cutting the knight's meat, things like that, um, chores around the house. But at 14, finally, you become a squire. You go and are allowed to polish and make sure the knight's armor is in good order. You can help the knight put on his armor. Um, you might carve meat, and you do combat training. One of the standard things of training is there would be a wooden post, and you would slice at the post hours and hours and hours to get your strength up, to go get you used to the swing, things like that. Now, the older you got, and the more experience of a squire, you would go into battle with your lord, but you were not expected to fight. You'd be trained and you would be there to take care of the horse if he dismounted. You'd be there to make sure he had the weapons he needed. But typically, you would not fight until you're pretty close to becoming a knight. So, you've been a page as a servant, you've been a squire, now you're ready to become a knight. So typically between the ages of 18 and 24 is the age that people would become a knight. And you would go and take part in the dubbing ceremony. And the way the dubbing ceremony works, we see it pictured down here on the bottom. First, you'd go to a church and spend the whole night praying that you would be a good, chivalrous knight, that you would follow the code, that you would honor and serve your Lord, that you would be brave. The church had to give the blessing, saying, yes, that you were allowed to become a knight. Often this would include you or your family, probably your family, because you're not going to have much wealth yet, making a nice donation to the church. Then you would go and be dubbed. So the dubbing ceremony, you'd go before a lord. You know, the movies always have it for a king or queen or princess. That didn't have to be the case. You could be dubbed by anyone above your station, any noble, and you would go onto your knees. They would go put the sword on one shoulder and then put the sword on the other shoulder and say, "Arise, sir." And the title Sir was given to the knights, meaning that now you have a title. You are a knight. And you're expected to follow the code of chivalry. Now, there were times that, for example, say you're a squire and the knight you were serving is gravely injured in battle, that you may essentially become a knight on the spot if through bravery. It was more rare, but it did happen. So, what is this chivalry thing that I've been mentioning about? And by the way, this is a hilarious joke. Let me get that for you because you got the moat right there, and then the drawbridge, and it's down, and you know how's he going to get it? But ha ha ha! Anyone who didn't laugh gets an F. Okay, so the chivalry is the knight's code of honor. We talked about Bushido, the samurai's code of honor, and it's similar. So first off, you have to be courageous. You have to be brave. Secondly, you have to be willing to protect the weak and the poor. Now, disclaimer, typically that's the weak and poor of your lord. If it is another lord's weak and poor, you're actually probably going to slice and dice them, but we'll get to that later. Also, this idea that you need to be willing to sacrifice your life to protect others, particularly protecting the life of your lord. You might be noticing a bit of a theme here. All right. Fourth, you need to be faithful to God and the church. So you had to follow the church laws. You had to go and at times donate and give to the church. You needed to, one part of the part, you're not going to go pillage and destroy churches when you're going and pillaging and destroying the villages, things like that. Also, you're supposed to have respect towards all women. Once again, typically this would be respect towards the women that are under your Lord's protection. Unfortunately, if you did not fall under the Lord's protection, you might have terrible things done to you by other knights, which is very sad. This idea of chivalry being truly what the knights followed, it's a bit romanticized. A lot of these ideas come up a little bit later, whereas the beginning of knights, it was really they were just a warrior. But we look back with rose-colored glasses on the knights of Europe. Now, the tournaments. Oh boy. Okay, so we get to the tournaments here. So there are two main events, although there'd be others. There's the melee, which some people pronounce melee. Melee is what I typically say. I think they're both technically correct. And basically, this is a disorganized, chaotic battle. So you'd have two teams of knights, maybe three teams at times, and they are just going to beat the snot out of each other. Now, they are not trying to go and kill each other. Knights are very expensive. They're very valuable. So this is just, they would have blunted weapons, but they would go fight until one team surrenders. People would get broken bones and, bloody noses and things like that from this. But yeah, just like the picture suggests, they are just beating the snot out of each other. Fun. And then, of course, we have the joust, where you have Knight A mounted over here, Knight B mounted over here on their horses. They have lances, and then they run at each other, trying to knock the other person off of the horse. I'll back up so you can see that picture again. Voila. I'll even shrink my face. Whoa, I'm shrinking. And then you see they would do this. This was an incredibly dangerous sport, and people did get seriously injured and die from it. Because imagine, you're going as fast as you can on your horse. They're going as fast as they can on their horse, and they're trying to knock each other off. So yeah, people broke bones. King of England wound up getting a terrible leg injury one time that basically changed his whole life because he could never really walk right again, and then had weird infections, smelled bad, all sorts of stuff. Okay, moving on. So the job of a knight. What was the job of the knight? Well, they were the elite soldiers of their time. They are the strong warriors. And why is this? Well, first off, they're better equipped. That armor is expensive. Most people that they fought did not have armor like that. It protected them very, very well. Mobility, there's this myth that knights weren't very mobile. If we were in school and not stuck at home, we would be able to have the Creative Society of Creative Historical Anachronism come, and they come up dressed as knights, and they show you, and they'll tell you that they can move pretty fast, and they can. So that's a bit of a myth that they can't move at all, but their mobility is a little bit slower. Also, these guys are trained. You've been learning about this whole knight thing since age 7 to perhaps 18 or 24. So maybe as long as 17 years you've been learning about knights. You've been going, when you're a squire, at age 14, you're going and you're getting combat training. So 4 to 10 years, you are training. Then when you are a knight, you go to tournaments, you participate. So most of the people at this time were peasants. Peasants given basically farm implements or spears to fight with against you. A mounted, armored soldier. So they would have a pitchfork, regular clothes. You have a horse that makes you go very fast. You have armor, so they can't hurt you. You have a sword or a lance, so you can slice and dice them and make them like Swiss cheese. This is why knights were so effective. Knights often didn't kill each other, but they killed a lot of regular people. All right. King Arthur is probably the most famous story in the Middle Ages for Europe. He probably didn't exist. There's a lot of poetry and poems about King Arthur. There's some old English things that talk about them. What we do probably know is there probably actually was a Merlin, which is kind of cool. Actually, there are more historical references to a Merlin than a King Arthur. Now, this whole legend with King Arthur is the sword and the stone, where he either pulls it from the stone, or he goes and the Lady of the Lake gives him this sword, and he has this Knights of the Round Table, which of course that the Round Table symbolizes equality with these knights and this idea of all being very chivalrous. I believe we watched a clip from this movie with the Trojan Rabbit last year. Unfortunately, we don't get to watch the Castle clip or the Black Knight clip. Maybe I can get those on my put them on the Google Classroom for you all. Anyways, that's our lesson today about knights. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I miss you. Please like, subscribe. Gets me up higher in the algorithm so that more people can get some of this good history stuff. Let's see. I can never get this to close right. Anyways.